The Living Kuan-yin, retold by Carol Kendall and Yao Wen Li. Even though the family name of Qin means gold, it does not signify that everyone of that name is rich. Long ago, in the province of Chukyang, however, there was a certain wealthy Qin family of whom it was popularly said that its fortune was as great as its name. It seemed quite fitting then, when a son was born to the family, that he should be called Po-wan, million, for he was certain to be worth 1,000,000 pieces of gold when he came of age. With such a happy circumstance of names, Po-wan himself never doubted that he would have a never-ending supply of money chinking through his fingers, and he spent it accordingly, not on himself, but on any unfortunate who came to his attention. He had a deep sense of compassion for anyone in distress of body or spirit. A poor man had only to hold out his hand, and Po-wan poured gold into it. If a destitute widow and her brood of starvelings but lifted sorrowful eyes to his, he provided them with food and lodging and friendship for the rest of their days. In such wise did he live that even 1,000,000 gold pieces were not enough to support him. His resources so dwindled that finally he scarcely had enough food for himself. His clothes flapped threadbare on his wasted frame, and the cold seeped into his bone marrow for lack of a fire. Still, he gave away the little money that came to him. One day, as he scraped out half of his bowl of rice for a beggar even hungrier than he began to ponder on his destitute state. Why am I so poor? He wondered. I have never spent extravagantly. I have never, from the day of my birth, done an evil deed. Why then am I, whose very name is 1,000,000 pieces of gold, no longer able to find even a copper to give this unfortunate creature, and have only a bowl of rice to share with him? He thought long about his situation, and at last determined to go without delay to the South Sea. Therein, it was told, dwelt the all-merciful goddess, the living Kuan-yin, who could tell the past and future. He would put his question to her, and she would tell him the answer. Soon he had left his home country behind and traveled for many weeks in unfamiliar lands. One day he found his way barred by a wide and furiously flowing river. As he stood first on one foot and then on the other, wondering how he could possibly get across, he heard a commanding voice calling from the top of an overhanging cliff. "Qin Po-wan," the voice said, "if you are going to the South Sea, please ask the living Kuan-yin a question for me." Yes, of course," Po-wan agreed at once, for he had never in his life refused a request made of him. In any case, the living Kuan-yin permitted each person who approached her 3 questions, and he had but one of his own to ask. Craning his head toward the voice coming from above, he suddenly began to tremble, for the speaker was a gigantic snake with a body as large as a temple column. Po-wan was glad he had agreed so readily to the request. "Ask her then," said the snake, "why I am not yet a dragon, even though I have practiced self-denial for more than 1,000 years." "That I will do, and gladly," stammered Po-wan, hoping that the snake would continue to practice self-denial just a bit longer. "But your snakery, or your serpentry, perhaps I should say, that is, you see, don't you, first I must cross this raging river, and I know not how." "That is no problem at all," said the snake. "I shall carry you across, of course." "Of course," Po-wan echoed weakly. Overcoming his fear and his reluctance to touch the slippery, slithery scales, Qin Po-wan climbed onto the snake's back and rode across quite safely. Politely, and just a bit hurriedly, He thanked the self-denying serpent and bade him goodbye. Then he continued on his way to the South Sea. By noon he was very hungry. Fortunately, a nearby inn offered meals at a price he could afford. While waiting for his bowl of rice, he chatted with the innkeeper and told him of the snake of the cliff, which the innkeeper knew well and respected, for the serpent always denied bandits the crossing of the river. Inadvertently, during the exchange of stories, Po-wan revealed the purpose of his journey. "Why then," cried the innkeeper, "let me prevail upon your generosity to ask a word for me." He laid an appealing hand on Po-wan's ragged sleeve. "I have a beautiful daughter," he said, "wonderfully amiable and pleasing of disposition. But although she is in her 20th year, she has never in all her life uttered a single word. I should be very much obliged if you would ask the living Kuan-yin why she is unable to speak." Po-wan, much moved by the innkeeper's plea for his mute daughter, of course promised to do so. For after all, the living Kuan-yin allowed each person 3 questions, and he had but one of his own to ask. Nightfall found him far from any inn, but there were houses in the neighborhood, and he asked for lodging at the largest. The owner, a man obviously of great wealth, was pleased to offer him a bed in a fine chamber, but first begged him to partake of a hot meal and good drink. Po-wan ate well, slept soundly, and, much refreshed, was about to depart the following morning when his good host, having learned that Po-wan was journeying to the South Sea, asked if he would be kind enough to put a question for him to the living Kuan-yin. "For 20 years," he said, "from the time this house was built, my garden has been cultivated with the utmost care. Yet in all those years not one tree, not one small plant has bloomed or borne fruit. And because of this, no bird comes to sing, nor bee to gather nectar. I don't like to put you to a bother, Chin Po-wan, but as you are going to the South Sea anyway, perhaps you would not mind seeking out the living Kuan-yin and asking her why the plants in my garden don't bloom." "I shall be delighted to put the question to her," said Po-wan. For after all, the living Kuan-yin allowed each person 3 questions, and he had but... Traveling onward, Po-wan examined the quandary in which he found himself. The living Kuan-yin allowed but 3 questions, and he had somehow, without quite knowing how, accumulated 4 questions. One of them would have to go unasked, but which? If he left out his own question, his whole journey would have been in vain. If, on the other hand, he left out the question of the snake, or the innkeeper, or the kind host, he would break his promise and betray their faith in him. A promise should never be made if it cannot be kept, he told himself. I made the promises, and therefore I must keep them. Besides, the journey will not be in vain, for at least some of these problems will be solved by the living Kuan-yin. Furthermore, assisting others must certainly be counted as a good deed, and the more good deeds abroad in the land, the better for everyone, including me. At last he came into the presence of the living Kuan-yin. First, he asked the serpent's question. Why is the snake of the cliff not yet a dragon, although he has practiced self-denial for more than 1,000 years? And the living Kuan-yin answered, On his head are 7 bright pearls. If he removes 6 of them, he can become a dragon. Next, Po-wan asked the innkeeper's question.